Hey there, Quentin. Hope your year started off well and you didn't come in dead last place in an office weight loss competition that you yourself started. On the bright side, I got a new camera holder, so maybe for once there'll be consistency of height. Here's everything I watched in February 2023. Okay, campers, rise and shine, and don't forget your booties, because as I have done for the last 3 years, on February 2nd, I watched Groundhog Day. Shout out to my local Cinemark for actually showing this movie on Groundhog Day. I can now say I've seen one of my favorite movies of all time on the big screen. I look forward to Groundhog Day every year just so I have an excuse to watch this movie. I think that makes it the only holiday I actually celebrate. The concept is perfect. The execution is flawless. Bill Murray as Phil transforms from somebody who would unironically refer to himself as the talent to somebody who just genuinely loves waking up in Puxatawney every morning. And just like Phil, I also fall in love with Andie MacDowell's Rita every time I watch this movie. Also, it's just really funny. I quote this movie constantly. I think I've done it like 7 times just this month alone. They're Hicks, Rita.
Yeah, they're Hicks, Rita.
Too early for flapjacks?
Too early for flapjacks?
My father was a piano mover, so.
Not bad, Mr. Connors. You say this is your first lesson?
Yes, but my father was a piano mover, so.
Of course, I give Groundhog Day, directed by Harold Ramis, a 10 out of 10. Okay, campers, rise and shine, and don't forget your booties, because as I have done for the last 3 years, on February 2nd, I watched Groundhog Day.
Do you ever have deja vu, Mrs. Lancaster?
I don't think so, but I could check with the kitchen.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
That makes Groundhog Day now the second entrant onto the 2023 10 out of 10 club, joining When Harry Met Sally, two rom-com titans. On February 5th, I did a movie night with my sister, and though I don't typically mess around with scary movies, I put a brave face on for her as we watched The Menu. So this wasn't something that was really on my radar. It wasn't something I was planning on watching, but I knew based on the reviews this was something I eventually had to check out. Plus, I'm just generally a fan of anything Ralph Fiennes. And yeah, I could see what those reviews were about. This was a really fun and funny horror movie with less emphasis on the horror elements. Now, I will say I enjoyed the movie, but it didn't go much deeper than that. I know a lot of other people, found some pretty deep commentary on class in this movie. And yes, the movie does use class as a theme, but I found it to be kind of, the surface level premise rather than really driving at some deep point. But yeah, if this satirical take on Chef's Table moved you to be somehow a more ethical consumer, then sure, why not? I give The Menu, directed by Mark Mylod, a 6 out of 10. In between The Menu and my next entry, I actually took a short movie hiatus to binge a series. I do occasionally watch TV shows from now and then, and I watched season 1 of the Apple TV Plus original series, Severance. Now, I'm not doing a review or anything. I just wanted to draw attention to it for posterity mostly. I will say, though, that we here at Got You Entertainment stand crying in your car before work. On February 10th, I finished watching a very British movie, Brian and Charles. If you've never heard of this movie before, I can't blame you. I genuinely don't remember how it got onto my radar, but I do know I missed it in theaters and then kind of just forgot about it until it popped up on Amazon Prime the other day. This film is about a small-town inventor named Brian who decides to build himself a companion that names itself Charles. Brian and Charles.
Charles, you like Charles?
Charles Petrescu.
You want that name, do you? Charles Petrescu? All right, then.
I'm Charles Petrescu. Hello, Brian.
Now, it took me a minute to settle into the movie, to the characters, mostly because I'm a big fan of the Ricky Gervais series Afterlife on Netflix. And the way David Earl plays Brian's character is nearly identical to the way he plays his character in that show. But while the acting style is very similar, the characters, thankfully, are very different, because in Afterlife, I can find his character pretty unlikable. This is a very small movie, and if that's not something you like in movies, then this probably isn't for you. But I think there's a lot to find pretty endearing here. I actually really admire stories that can create tension and create stakes where, on a literal level, the stakes are pretty low. But as long as the characters believe that what they're doing is important, and as long as we believe the characters, that's all that really matters. I will say this movie didn't have anything new to say regarding its themes, in my opinion, but it was a nice watch regardless. And so I give Brian and Charles, directed by Jim Archer, a 5 out of 10. Oh, buckle up. So later on, still on February 10th, I wanted to watch the latest movie from the director of American Beauty, Skyfall, 1917, Sam Mendes. This is Empire of Light. This movie, based on cast and crew alone, I'm sure was clearing room on its shelves for an Oscar. Director Sam Mendes, cinematographer Roger Deakins, composers Reznor and Ross, lead actress Olivia Colman. This seems like the dream team. And then I started seeing some pretty negative reviews, and I refused to believe any of them. I couldn't believe any of them. This was too big to fail. So what was the problem? It's the story. I read one review from a reviewer who calls himself Stringer Bell, and I think he put it pretty well. He opens his review with, Sam Mendes is too good of a director to direct scripts written by Sam Mendes. The score is beautiful, the sets are beautiful, the shots are immaculate, and yet it's all lipstick on this pig of a story. Not even to mention how poorly the movie was marketed, in my opinion. This story was sold as, the story of a dying movie theater, how the magic of movies would bring it back to life and touch this cast of characters along the way, and that's not what we got. To be fair to the marketing team, if they gave us what the actual story was, I think fewer people would have gone to see it than actually did go to see it, which was very few. This isn't even fun for me. I don't want to crap on this movie. But what the heck even is this? Racism bad? Movie's good. That's about the full extent of the message you're going to find in Empire of Light. But it's also something about mental health. It's also something about sexual harassment in the workplace. It's also something about love overcoming prejudice. It's also nothing. I give Empire of Light, directed and written by Sam Mendes, a 1 out of 10. Now, I'm not planning on doing a 1 out of 10 club because I think that's a little mean. I think that's pouring it on a bit too much. But boy, was I tempted to make an exception for this movie. On February 11th, I watched the Don Hertzfeldt animated short film trilogy, World of Tomorrow. Even though technically these are 3, separate and distinct short films, I'd like to talk about them all at once. I think they work really nicely together, so might as well. First of all, the format, very cool. It's like an anthology story, but it also follows one cohesive story. Technically, it's only 2 central characters, but we see a lot of iterations of them throughout the story. Very, very unique, very innovative. I'm just a big fan of how Don Hertzfeldt sees the world. And I can't say this about every artist, but through his films, through what he's doing, I really feel like I'm taking a look behind the curtain. I don't want to say too much more about this series because I really think it's one of those that's better experienced for yourself. I really think it's worth checking out. Now, it's not the most convenient thing to track down. I think it's on Vimeo. I ended up, I was able to watch it by becoming a member to Don Hertzfeldt's YouTube channel. However you got to find it, I recommend tracking it down. If you do watch it, I hope you like it. I know it's one that's going to stick with me for a good long while. And I'm glad I got to watch the full series in one sitting because I think from start to finish, it pays off really well. I give World of Tomorrow, directed by Don Hertzfeldt, a 9 out of 10. On February 12th, I watched a film that was recommended on one of those Film Bro Instagram recommendation pages from 2006. This is the movie Cashback. So I was actually really on board with what this movie was doing for about the first third or so of the movie, the director was able to take really mundane things, even a character in a full-on depression, and do really interesting things with that visually. And then we get into, the second act, the supermarket setting of the movie, and it becomes problematic at best. And it's also around this point in the movie where the shots become a little less interesting. I think a lot of that was probably front-loaded, poured into the first half. Instead of those kind of dynamic transition shots we were getting, it changes to more of a freeze time kind of effect, which was probably novel in 2006, but by now it's something we've seen a lot of. In the end, I cannot endorse this movie, despite its strong start, and it looks like the director has since mostly switched to doing historical pieces, so unfortunately I may never get to see that marriage of style and subject matter again. I give Cashback, directed by Sean Ellis, a 3 out of 10. On February 15th, I watched the John Boyega-led film Breaking. Going into this one, I hadn't heard anything about the story. The only thing I knew going into this one was that John Boyega put in a good performance, and boy, is that an understatement.
Wait.
Wait! It's all up its hole! It's the wait!
Brian.
What do I need to do to get the attention that I need right now?
I had already made my favorites of the year video scripts before seeing this movie, but I can promise you, if I had watched this and then made that video, John Boyega would probably not only be in my honorable mentions, he'd be in that top 5. He's just that good in this movie. And he kind of has to be that guy in this movie. It's kind of all on him. It only takes place, between a couple of central characters in pretty much one location the entire movie. We're just staring at him for however long the runtime is. And yet, they're able to tell a really affecting story. Affecting to the point that both me and the friend I was watching it with after just felt that heap of emotion, felt that sadness. Not that surface level sadness, but that sadness that sticks with you, that real feeling. And yes, it is worth noting at this point that this film is based on a true story. A true story that I don't even remember hearing about at the time. So I want to take a moment and say thank you to the filmmakers for giving this story a second chance at life, a second chance to be heard. I give Breaking, directed by Abi Damaris Corbin, a 9 out of 10. On February 16th, I watched the 1985 movie Fletch, starring Chevy Chase. I don't have a ton to say about this one. I liked last year's Confess Fletch, starring John Hamm. He reminded me so much of like a classic Cary Grant character that I wanted to see, if it was a remake of that kind of era of movie. And while it wasn't that, I did find out that Confess Fletch is at least in the same character, in the same series as this movie that came out in 1985. And I did actually end up liking this one more than the John Hamm movie. I'm not sure why. I think it's just the way Chevy Chase plays this character. He's able to deliver line after line of snark and sarcasm in a way that almost made me hate the guy as much as root for him.
Isn't there a children's book about an elephant named Babar?
I don't know. I don't have any.
No children?
No elephant books.
Anyway, it's on Netflix now. It's a pretty fun watch, so it's a recommendation for me. If you're looking for a comedy mystery that's light on the mystery and heavy on the comedy, I'd give Fletch a shot. I give Fletch, directed by Michael Ritchie, a 6 out of 10. Later that same day, still on February 16th, I watched my first new 2023 just came out movie, Marvel's Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. So based on the trailers that I really ought to stop watching, I had pretty high expectations going into this movie. It looked like it was going to be this epic tale told in a strange new world, and that Elton John cover. Epic. But then a day before I was going to go see it, on opening night, the review embargo dropped, and I accidentally caught a glimpse of its critical Rotten Tomato score, which was at 52%. Pretty unprecedented for a Marvel project. And suddenly I was nervous I was about to go into more of a Thor Love and Thunder or, God forbid, another Ant-Man and the Wasp. And so finally, having not seen a flicker of film, with all this baggage and expectations, I actually watched the movie, and I liked it. Even now, a couple weeks removed from having seen it in theaters, my opinion is only really softened on it over time. Now, will you absolutely love Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania? Maybe. Probably not. But there's also not a ton to hate here either. On the positive side, you have this cool, new, unique world building. You have a quote-unquote heist scene that I think is probably the pinnacle of all Ant-Man scenes. And of course, you have Jonathan Majors as Kang the Conqueror, who I'm really looking forward to seeing more of. He was definitely the best part of this movie for me. On the negative side, you definitely still have that more recent persisting problem of the visuals not quite looking done. A lot of like green screeny type effects that will take you out of the immersion. You have the Wasp, a title character with very little to do, which is pretty odd. The acting is so-so outside of definitely Jonathan Majors and maybe Paul Rudd. Otherwise, it's kind of weak across the board. And then somewhere in the middle of good and bad, kind of things that just are, you have your Marvel tone, which by now you either love it or you hate it. Of course, you have the story of the movie, which I would say has a ton of potential, but ultimately it's what holds this movie back the most from being great. So you take all those elements, the good, the bad, the middle, you combine them, you put them into a movie, you put that out in theaters, and you get something lacking. Something that could use a bit more. Not something hateable, not something terrible, something kind of in the middle. And out of all 40 of the MCU projects we've gotten in the last 15 years, I think that's where this one's going to end up for me. Right in the middle. But hey, it's still the best Ant-Man movie. I give Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, directed by Peyton Reed, a 5 out of 10. On February 17th, I watched the theatrical limited re-release of another one of my all-time favorites, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Now, I don't know what this says about me, so I went to see Ant-Man and the Wasp opening night, Thursday night, and could not drum up support for it. Didn't care to, went to see it alone. I refused to see Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon alone. We could only get a 10 o'clock showing. I don't care. I dragged as many people as I could to go see that thing, and we were the only people in there aside from one other old dude. I really don't think I can heap enough praise on this movie. I know plenty of others have tried, and I really will just be echoing their sentiments. I could talk your ear off just based off the stunt work alone, which I think is second to none. I think it's the best action choreography I've ever seen, still to this day.
我乃是小心，快手里有宝剑！潇洒人间一线牵。
One of the friends I went to see it with, a day, even 2 days after, he kept thinking about that movie. He kept wanting to talk about it, especially the end, trying to figure out what it all meant. What does it mean? Watch it. Watch it for yourself. And you better hope it comes back to theaters, because that is the way to experience this movie. I give Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, directed by Ang Lee, a 10 out of 10. And hey, 2 10 out of 10 club entrants in 1 month. This might end up being a pretty crowded club after all. On February 19th, I went to a group of friends movie night where the voting came down between the Lego Batman movie and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Puss in Boots won unanimously. Considering I just talked about this movie on the last show, I don't have too much to add. I will say the one thing that kind of changed viewing to viewing is how I thought of John Mulaney's character. I actually liked him a lot more this time. And that's about it. Considering I was laying in an empty kiddie pool looking up at the screen to watch this and didn't have any negative detractors, I think that says a lot about this movie. They should add that to the marketing. It's a movie so good you can watch this lying on the ground. And so I still give Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, directed by Joel Crawford, an 8 out of 10. On February 20th, in an effort to get around to watching all of the Best Picture nominees before the actual Academy Awards ceremony, I watched nominee Triangle of Sadness. So this movie does something kind of interesting. It's structured in 3 parts rather than like your traditional 1 story, 3 act structure. And so, of course, some people are going to have their preference of one part over the other. For example, I follow Schaefer Ellis Productions, and he absolutely loved the first 2 parts, but said the third almost ruined the movie outright for him. Now, I thought the first part was fine. I was not a fan of the second. And the third is what actually kind of saved this movie as a whole for me. Similarly to The Menu, actually, this movie has a theme of, that eat the rich kind of rhetoric. And I think the second part probably does the best job of getting that across to the audience. However, it does it in a way that I just do not resonate with at all. And if you've seen the movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. So I can't say it was bad, but I can definitely say it was not for me. And then you couple that with the fact that I just didn't really like any of the characters. And maybe that was the point. Maybe that's more realistic. But for a movie watching perspective, especially for me, I like having that, one character I can root for, that one character that gets me emotionally invested in their story. And so I was kept a bit of a distance away from Triangle of Sadness. Now, I am glad I checked it out, but it's not going to be one I go back to anytime soon. If this did end up winning Best Picture, I'd be very confused. I give Triangle of Sadness, directed by Ruben Östlund, a 4 out of 10. And finally, on February 26th, after another short movie break, catching up on some series, some other things, I once again got together with my sister and my niece this time, and we watched the latest Disney animated feature, Strange World. Ironically, my niece is the only one who's actually seen the movie before, but whatever, we made her watch it anyway. So I just feel really bad for Strange World, like really bad. It lost so much money, to the point that I'm worried it's going to set Disney back on making high-budget original animated films for years to come. And that's really a shame, because I think it might genuinely be one of the most beautiful visually animated movies I've ever seen. I just don't think the story was strong enough to support it. Now, it wasn't bad by any means, and I don't buy the story, go woke, go broke on this. I'm not sure why audiences didn't show up. If I did, I'd probably be a Disney executive. It's probably some combination of Disney Plus reducing theatrical demand, the marketing strategy, and just simply the quality of the movie, the quality of the story. Also, just side question, why Jake Gyllenhaal? Like, there's nothing particularly unique about his voice. Like, I don't think any kid is going, hey, Mom, is that the guy from Nocturnal Animals? At least Dennis Quaid had like an animation-worthy voice. He was kind of this larger-than-life character. I don't know. That was a weird decision. I don't know. I don't know what to say, Strange World. I'm sorry. It wasn't you who failed. It was this Strange World that failed you. I give Strange World, directed by Don Hall, a 4 out of 10. Only 4? Thought I gave it at least a 5. 4, I guess. I do really hope Don Hall lands on his feet after this, considering this was his big follow-up to also disappointing Disney animated feature, Raya and the Last Dragon.
Impressed, huh? Oh, wait till you see my backstroke. I'm a wicked when I hit that liquid. I got water skills that kill. I slaughter when I hit the water.
Well, Quentin, that does it for me in this shortest of months. I hope you had a chance to watch something good during it. March coming up promises a couple of films I'm looking forward to. You have Creed, 65, John Wick Chapter 4, to name a couple. Not to mention, by next show, we'll know who won all the Oscars. And I'm already pre-cringing at all of the slap jokes during the ceremony. See you then.